Some people read gentle faces and think they've just found a quiet place to rest, never realizing they've walked into a forge that's been burning for years. Quiet doesn't mean empty, it means attentive, collecting every detail while others trip over their own noise. People often confuse a gentle hand for an open invitation, mistaking warmth for weakness, and then find themselves startled when the floor shifts beneath them. What really unravels the schemes of those who plot in secret isn't confrontation, it's the unshakable certainty that comes from years of observing, learning, and holding back until the time is right. Most never realize the subtle force guiding the outcome wasn't born out of rage, but out of clarity. When the truth finally rises, it does so not with a shout, but like sunlight breaking through a crack, impossible to ignore. What looked like an easy target becomes the lesson they'll never forget. If you've enjoyed this, consider subscribing for more. Your support helps us grow, and you'll never miss out on what's next. Depth of feeling is often mistaken for frailty, as if noticing a hidden melody in a crowded room could ever be a weakness. Observers may dismiss someone for their gentleness, believing that empathy makes them easy to sway, blind to the strength that lives in quiet awareness. What goes unseen is the way subtle observation builds a private map of intentions, a map no trickster can navigate. Schemes lose their grip when faced with someone whose understanding runs so deep that every false gesture is quietly recorded, not with confrontation but with patient insight. Rather than reacting with outrage or desperation, silent witnesses store every move, letting the truth unfold at its own pace. This stillness isn't surrender, it's deliberate preparation. Genuine perception cannot be faked, nor can it be fooled. So when the moment arrives, the decision comes swift and precise, leaving those who misjudged standing in confusion. What seemed like inaction was actually decisive mastery, exercised without fanfare. The surprise is never in the ending, but in the realization that what appeared to be easy prey was really a quietly held advantage all along. Some believe cleverness lives in quick maneuvers and secret signals, convinced that strategy is only for those willing to bend the rules. Yet beneath the surface, awareness grows sharper with every test, quietly collecting patterns and storing every small detail. While others waste energy setting up traps, the real contender has already charted every possible outcome. Plans made behind closed doors fall apart, not because they were uncovered with a flourish, but because the game was outgrown before it began. The pursuit of power through artifice rings hollow to someone who values integrity over spectacle. Even as manipulation plays out, the higher game remains invisible, calm, resolute, immune to bait. Departure arrives not with anger, but as a quiet clearing of space, the mark of someone whose presence was the true leverage all along. The aftermath leaves only the echo of missed opportunity for those who thought they held the upper hand, unaware they'd been left behind in a contest that no longer mattered. The most commanding strength is the one that walks away, leaving the illusions to dissolve in the absence of reaction. Some people misinterpret a steady, watchful calm for weakness, never guessing it's the sign of someone who can see through the haze while others get lost in it. While accusations and provocations whirl around, staying unshaken isn't the product of oblivion but the mark of someone who reads every move, letting others show their true intentions. Instead of joining the scramble for control, that calm is a shield, choosing patience not out of defeat but as an act of pure mastery. When expectations build for a show of outrage or drama, they find instead an unsettling quiet, a quiet that doesn't feed their hunger for attention or give them ammunition to twist the truth. Every silent moment is a decision, a step back from the noise, not because there's nothing to say but because not every battle is worth fighting aloud. Letting events unfold and watching closely, it becomes clear who stands where. Detachment happens not in a storm of words, but in a moment so quiet it startles those who assumed indifference. The exit is never abrupt, it's the result of watching the puzzle solve itself in silence, until the pieces no longer fit. Those left behind try to make sense of a calm they cannot reach, realizing only too late that their power faded the moment their game stopped finding an audience. Kindness often wears an unassuming face, rarely revealing the discipline and strength required to uphold it when met with ridicule or manipulation. The generous heart is easy to dismiss, especially by those who mistake courtesy for a lack of resolve or gentle patience for a lack of boundaries. Over and over, provocations are tossed out, as if goodwill could be exhausted through enough repetition, as if empathy could be mistaken for naivete. Yet, holding firm to composure isn't a symptom of passivity but a deliberate act of restraint, a conscious choice to refrain from mirroring the chaos around. Instead of retaliating or shrinking, that quiet endurance measures the intentions of others, allowing them space to correct their course, even as they misread the silence as surrender. There comes a limit, a quiet turning point, when the effort to accommodate is withdrawn, not with noise or dramatic gestures, but with the subtle clarity of someone who knows their value and will not diminish it further. What once was an open door becomes a closed chapter, not because of sudden change but because respect finally claimed its place. Those left behind may call this coldness, but it's nothing new, it's simply the true foundation, once wrapped in patience, now standing alone, no longer to be mistaken for something it never was. Loyalty often gets misread as a failure to see, when in truth it can be a vigilant presence observing every contradiction. Some believe steadfastness means obliviousness, assuming that consistent support is born of a lack of awareness. All the while, overlooked glances, subtle changes in tone, and actions taken when no one is supposed to notice do not escape attention. Intentions and motives are weighed with care, and the patience to remain through uncomfortable truths is less about naivety and more about seeing how a story will unfold. This isn't about waiting in confusion, but rather gathering quiet confirmation, giving room for someone to step up and choose better, an opportunity extended with every moment of understanding. It is never a reflex, but a conscious act, waiting to see if respect would ever be reciprocated. When that final lesson arrives, departure is silent but complete, made not in a rush of anger, but after every possible answer has been accounted for. What was thought to be an easy advantage becomes a loss impossible to reverse, and confusion grows where certainty once lived. The patience that once held space for transformation withdraws, leaving behind neither bitterness nor regret, but a sense of closure and the realization that every effort was intentional. There is no lingering at the threshold, only the quiet assurance of having seen enough, and the freedom that follows when investment meets its conclusion. Overconfidence often sets its own trap, inviting those who believe themselves untouchable to reveal the very truths they aim to hide. While some cloak themselves in smooth words and calculated gestures, assuming their schemes go unseen, their bravado quietly becomes their undoing. The act of underestimating another's awareness leads them to abandon caution, growing more careless with every word and gesture. Assumptions about being ahead foster a careless rhythm, each step taken with the belief that no one is paying attention. Meanwhile, observation sharpens, noting every contradiction, every mismatch between expression and intent, cataloging the signs that others miss. No urgent call-out, no premature challenge, just silent patience, allowing the illusion to persist until it fractures by its own weight. As the mask slips and stories grow tangled, the one presumed passive is simply gathering clarity. In the end, exposure doesn't arrive through confrontation or dramatic reveals, but through the quiet unraveling set in motion by arrogance. Astonishment colors the aftermath, not because the truth emerged suddenly, but because the knowledge was present all along, silently recorded while the performance played on. The downfall wasn't engineered by anyone else, it unfolded as a natural consequence, a slow collapse orchestrated by misplaced self-assurance and unchecked presumption. Some never realize when the audience knows the ending before the final act. There are those who position themselves as authorities, convinced they hold all the answers, eager to impose their approach on anyone who seems outside their control. Setting up scenarios and measuring reactions, they imagine themselves as the architects of someone else's growth, certain their tactics will reshape character or instill humility. Their confidence is rooted in assumption, overlooking the fact that wisdom forged in genuine transformation cannot be bestowed through shallow strategies or manipulative games. Attempts to unsettle, provoke, or draw out insecurity fall flat when met with the kind of calm that comes from deep inner knowing. It is not defiance, but a quiet refusal to step into a contest that has no relevance at a higher level of understanding. Unaffected by attempts at dominance, insight comes from a place untouched by approval or rejection, a perspective that has already processed greater storms than any social maneuver could ever stir up. Lessons are not received from the hands of those clinging to control, but from the unfolding of personal growth born through acceptance and the courage to let go. Those operating from unrest try to teach discipline, not realizing the recipient is already standing on ground that no longer trembles under the weight of other people's projections. Patience becomes the measure of maturity, not the absence of challenge, and the refusal to play along is not arrogance, but a sign that growth has moved to another realm entirely. Influence fades in the face of someone who has already outgrown the need for external validation, moving forward with a sense of peace earned beyond any game others might try to orchestrate. In the presence of agitation and disruption, tranquility can sometimes create a discomfort more profound than any outburst. There are those who attempt to kindle discord, seeking to pull others into a whirlwind of conflict with calculated provocations and subtle affronts, certain that the only possible response is to mirror their unrest. Efforts are made to lure out a spectacle, a breakdown, or a scene that validates their intentions and lets them point to the chaos as proof of instability. The orchestration is meticulous, methods shift from open confrontation to covert mockery, from sudden silence to dismissive glances in public settings. All are deployed with the hope of extracting a visceral reaction, one that can later be used as a shield for their own motives. As the provocations intensify, anticipation grows for a moment when self-control finally fractures. The ones stirring the pot remain convinced that stillness means resignation, or worse, defeat. Yet, beneath the unshaken surface lies a reservoir of strength not drawn from resistance but from a refusal to participate in a cycle of escalation. What disturbs most is not a shouted retort, but an unwavering poise that refuses to acknowledge the manipulative rhythm being set. Eyes remain calm, voice steady, actions deliberate, each a silent declaration that another's behavior holds no dominion over personal peace. When the urge to retaliate is suppressed, and energy is conserved rather than scattered, a new dynamic emerges, one where the instigator loses their script. The refusal to take the bait reveals the true intention behind the disturbance. There was never a desire for resolution, only a craving for turmoil. The unbroken composure is misread as vulnerability until it becomes evident that it is, in fact, a silent power move, a way of holding ground without a single verbal blow. This unresponsiveness becomes an enigma, provoking a realization in those seeking drama that their influence has withered. Each attempt to rattle confidence falls flat, causing the one seeking control to experience an unfamiliar sense of helplessness. Instead of being drawn into the tempest, the calm presence acts as an anchor, rendering all external chaos powerless. The expected spectacle never arrives. The carefully constructed strategies dissolve, leaving only questions about why old methods suddenly fail to produce the intended chaos. The stage is set for confrontation, but the lead actor never delivers the lines demanded by the antagonist. Silence becomes its own answer, a strategy that removes the oxygen from the fire others attempt to ignite. This discipline is not about avoidance or denial, it's about discernment, choosing when and how to engage, if at all. As patience is exercised and reaction withheld, the tables subtly turn, and the initiator of conflict finds themselves exposed to their own reflection. No longer in control of the narrative, their machinations are met with an unshakable presence that refuses to mirror disorder. Witnessing this, the initiators find themselves confronted with their own intentions. Every effort to unsettle is met with measured indifference, each ploy rendered ineffective by the simple refusal to grant them the chaos they crave. What once felt like a game with predictable moves now seems a futile attempt to gain traction on solid ground. This unexpected outcome unsettles those used to commanding emotional responses, leaving them in a void of their own making. Eventually, the realization dawns that peace, when unwavering, is more destabilizing than any eruption of anger. There is no emotional display to dissect, no apology to demand, no evidence to use as ammunition. The calm stands as a quiet verdict, dismantling their schemes without ever stooping to their level. In this dynamic, the true source of strength becomes evident, not in the ability to outshout, but in the ability to remain untouched. The one who maintains composure is not repressing emotion but choosing a higher vantage point from which to see the situation. That view, unclouded by the smoke of confrontation, is where real power resides. Here, dignity remains intact, self-respect is preserved, and the manipulator's hold dissolves. The energy once used to defend against attack is now redirected toward growth and self-mastery. What remains after all attempts at disruption have failed is a space of undeniable clarity. The instigator stands in the ruins of their own schemes, realizing at last that their influence evaporated the moment their chaos was no longer reflected. The calm endures, not as a mask, but as the genuine article of inner strength. The process of attempting to dismantle another's sense of self often reveals far more about the perpetrator than the intended target. Some approach with a determination to inflict harm, armed with manipulation, unspoken accusations, or calculated blame. Every shortcoming within is projected outward, cloaked in criticism or delivered in doses of guilt, each effort calculated to diminish another. When personal failures become too heavy to carry, responsibility is quietly shifted onto convenient scapegoats, painting a distorted narrative where the one under attack is assigned the role of antagonist. Repeated efforts to inflict doubt or diminish self-worth gradually begin to expose the mechanisms at play. Attempts to cover insecurity with attacks, to replace accountability with accusation, create an echo chamber in which each insult and manipulation bounces back, amplified by its own lack of authenticity. The one standing firm becomes a silent observer, holding a position grounded in authenticity rather than defense. This posture is not about being unfeeling, but about refusing to join the dance of self-destruction orchestrated by another's unresolved pain. As the drama escalates, clarity emerges. The drive to harm is not truly directed outward, but stems from an inability to confront uncomfortable truths within. The struggle becomes less about victory over another and more about avoiding the reality reflected by a consistent, unwavering presence. In this way, the intended victim becomes a canvas upon which the accuser paints their own internal battle. No counterattack is needed, the truth quietly stands its ground, illuminating what others desperately try to hide. Every attempt to undermine another's dignity paradoxically chips away at the instigator's own integrity. The strategies that once brought a sense of control begin to backfire. The more fervently they attempt to tarnish reputations, the clearer it becomes who is spinning tales. A pattern emerges: the more energy expended on character assassination, the more transparent the motives become to anyone willing to look. The truth becomes unavoidable, not through confrontation, but through consistency. As the attacks are met not with retaliation but with unwavering honesty, the perpetrator is forced to face the consequences of their actions. The effort to cast someone else as the problem unravels as the facts fail to support the story being told. The relentless pursuit to wound another only serves to lay bare the insecurities that gave rise to the conflict in the first place. Standing firm in authenticity, the one under attack becomes a silent catalyst for revelation. Without accusation or retaliation, presence alone creates the opportunity for others to see themselves clearly, if they dare. The collapse of the perpetrator's illusions is not orchestrated through a battle, but through the impossibility of denying what becomes obvious in the light of steadfast truth. As the facade crumbles, attempts at manipulation lose their power. The urge to provoke a reaction turns into bewilderment as expected responses are replaced with quiet understanding. The process is not about being unmovable or unaffected, but about refusing to play a role that was never chosen. The silence is not empty, but filled with meaning, refusing to echo the chaos directed at it. What remains, in the wake of all failed attempts to control, is the realization that the damage done was self-inflicted. The hands that tried to dismantle another's foundation end up empty, not because they were resisted, but because there was nothing left to grasp. Each accusation, each twisting of truth, has become a weight carried by the one who created it. The battle never truly left the person who started it. In the end, it is not the intended target who bears the scars. It is the initiator of harm, left standing amid the remnants of their own deception. The consistent, real presence they attempted to fracture remains intact, not through aggression, but through the strength of never abandoning self-honesty. The cycle of projection and denial has nowhere left to go. The quiet remains, proof that survival need not be loud, and that the most profound impact is often made without raising a single voice. Relentless attempts to break another's spirit often reveal a fundamental misunderstanding of what endurance truly means. Piling on disappointments, orchestrating betrayals, or repeatedly crossing boundaries is assumed to be enough to make even the strongest falter. Yet, beneath each fresh wound, a remarkable capacity for renewal quietly develops. Each moment of being underestimated becomes a silent rehearsal for transformation. Where others might expect withdrawal or defeat, there is instead an internal gathering of strength, a resolve that deepens rather than shatters. Setbacks are not met with surrender, but with a decision to adapt, to evolve, to find new sources of meaning in the very places where loss was intended to take root. Resilience takes form not through avoidance of pain, but by standing within it, extracting wisdom from each disappointment. The suffering becomes raw material, something to observe, understand, and ultimately refine into insight. What could have calcified into bitterness is instead molded into discernment. The need for vengeance fades, replaced by a focus on personal growth, a shift so quiet that it goes unnoticed until the effects become impossible to ignore. The lessons that come from hardship build a new foundation, brick by brick, from the debris of broken trust and shattered expectation. No external force determines the value of a journey that has been shaped in solitude and reflection. Each scar becomes a mark of navigation, guiding the way through unfamiliar territory with increasing confidence. Experience, once viewed as a burden, now provides a vantage point from which to spot deception before it arrives and to recognize authentic connection when it appears. There's no longer a need to prove anything to those who doubted. The act of rising again speaks for itself. The evolution from victim to survivor is marked by a subtle yet irreversible shift. Opportunities once sought from others are now discovered within. With each challenge, sensitivity sharpens, but so does the ability to recognize what truly matters. Defenses are no longer built from fear, but from a clear sense of what aligns with inner truth. The old self, shaped by need and longing, is replaced by someone who has learned to cultivate peace in places where none was offered. Boundaries become less about keeping others out and more about honoring what has been learned. Attempts to revisit the past fall flat, the story has moved forward. Those who tried to reduce another's worth now struggle to comprehend the new reality. They find no purchase where they once found control. The ground has shifted, and the person they once dismissed has become unreachable, not through distance, but through growth. Where others tried to sow doubt and instability, something unexpected took root: self-trust. The landscape is no longer defined by the scars left behind, but by what has been built atop them. Every lesson absorbed, every trial endured, becomes a tool, wielded with intention, not to harm, but to discern what belongs and what does not. Now, those who doubted stand at the edge of a changed world, searching for the weakness they once exploited. In its place, they find a presence that is clear, composed, and no longer interested in old battles. The ground that was meant to be a site of collapse has become a foundation. What stands is not only a survivor but an architect, crafting a life from the remnants of what others thought could destroy. This quiet transformation leaves former adversaries uncertain, unable to find the leverage they once held. Control slips away, and admiration replaces manipulation, though too late to regain proximity. The narrative has shifted entirely. What was intended as an ending has become a beginning, and the evidence of resilience stands unmovable, a testament to what can be created from adversity. Misconceptions about strength often originate from a reliance on outside recognition as proof of worth. Believing validation must come from others, there are those who withhold it, expecting doubt to flourish in its absence. Accomplishments are overlooked, progress diminished, presence ignored. The expectation is simple: without applause, the drive to continue will fade. If appreciation is withheld, surely self-belief will wither. This, however, is a miscalculation born of misunderstanding what gives a person true power. What flourishes in the shadows is not the need for recognition, but the capacity for self-acknowledgement. Confidence is cultivated in quiet spaces, away from crowds and praise, where identity is defined not by approval but by authenticity. The drive to excel becomes independent of outside commentary. Fulfillment is found in the process, not the performance. Recognition by others becomes unnecessary when inner clarity has already taken root. Indifference from others can't obscure the radiance that is self-sustained. The absence of support no longer translates to a lack of momentum. In rooms where encouragement is scarce, initiative becomes a private celebration, and progress is measured by personal milestones. The journey continues, fueled by conviction rather than audience. This autonomy is perplexing to those who depend on external validation for their own sense of self. To move confidently, regardless of whether anyone is watching, is a form of freedom that few understand. The withdrawal of support, intended to hinder, instead becomes irrelevant. The ability to persevere and grow without needing permission unsettles those who cannot imagine such independence. The journey transforms when the source of strength is internal. Every step forward, every act of courage, is its own reward. Spaces that once felt confining are left behind, no longer worthy of containment. The insistence on shrinking to fit outdated expectations ends, replaced by a determination to occupy the fullness of one's own identity, no matter how misunderstood. There is no longer any reliance on being chosen, celebrated, or given permission to exist in a particular way. Ownership of personal power becomes the only crown needed, and the approval of others fades into the background. The freedom to self-define is reclaimed, and the process of creation continues, undeterred by silence, unfazed by doubt. Observers may wonder how so much was achieved with so little external support. The secret is not in the presence of encouragement, but in the refusal to be defined by its absence. The foundation of strength is internal, resilient, and beyond the reach of anyone who might try to diminish it through neglect. Attempts to dim the light only serve to highlight its origin. No amount of indifference can suppress the truth echoing from within. Accomplishment is not the result of applause but of steadfast conviction, and that is what endures, regardless of who is watching.